Hello, and welcome to the Muses Lab, your destination for all things spiritual, sensual, and pleasurable. Here I explore the nuances of our human experience, connect with practitioners to support your glow up, and share my lessons and blessings as perspective to move you closer to alignment and self-empowerment. I invite you to join me on this adventure of discovery and hope what you receive inspires you to become the muse of your life's journey. So without further ado, let's explore. Hello, and welcome to the Muses Lab Podcast. It's your girl, Siobhan L. And here's another exploration that I'm deep diving into. And lately, I've been returning back. I'm going to say I've been returning back to myself. And I'm saying that I've been returning back to myself because if you have been either OG Muses Lab, a community, or if you've been listening to the podcast since it was the Say It With Sex podcast, and my brand was Say It With Sex, and you have been a part of that evolution, you know that sex and pleasure is my thing. And I feel like as people in general, we will start on a specific path and we'll feel good about that specific path and we'll feel connected to that path and really feel like this is what I am supposed to be doing. And then a shift happens. I think I've talked about how I went from Say It With Sex to the Muses Lab and how that transition has been very visceral for me, because I finally had found my footing with the Say It With Sex brand, and to have to transition out of that name. So I had to grieve that, transition out of that name, transition out of really deep diving into what I called pleasure scholarship, and deep diving into pleasure in general, deep diving into sexual identity, going into pleasure practice and in depth with that, and then having to switch and look at sex and pleasure, particularly pleasure, from a space of practicality, from a space of integration, was challenging for me. I did not know how to look at the practical side of pleasure. And because I did not know how to look at the practical side of pleasure, integration between who I am as a spiritualist, who I know I am as a pleasure scholar, pleasure priestess, that name was given to me, someone who is working towards being pleasure embodied, integrating that with my ADHD brain and not feeling as if I had to suppress one in order for the other to be amplified, or schedule myself on how I shared my thoughts, things that were divinely given to me. I did not want to feel like I had to put those things on a schedule. And because a lot of it felt like I had to put certain things on a schedule in my brain, like no one told me that, but in my brain, I felt like I had to put certain things on a schedule. I didn't know how to easily flow through the spiritual, sensual, sexual, pleasurable aspect of who I am. And the information that I have been trying to synthesize and share as those things were being downloaded to me, as those thoughts were being given to me, as those visions were being given to me. So I struggled with this space of embodiment because I just didn't know how to be. And that's something, as a person who has masked majority of their life, existing, has been very challenging for me. And I'm learning in my latter adult years how to properly do that. So those of you who know, that's who I've been. I'm returning back to that part of myself. And I feel like I'm returning home. I'm returning home to myself because I've experienced enough in these last 2.5 years where I have learned how to execute integration in a way that makes sense to me. And because I've experienced a complete and total breakdown of my life as I knew it, and I am rebuilding from the parts that I've been able to save that are still aligned in the direction that I'm I am to be going into because I'm there. I feel like now my spirit and my soul is like, oh, good. Now you can be who you've always been designed to be without any of those antiquated thoughts, behaviors, and things that are misaligned with who you are evolving into, the higher form and version of yourself. Like, this is not my final form. But as I am evolving as the Super Saiyan that I am, a Super Saiyan of pleasure, as I am evolving as I am and returning to practitioners who I want to learn from, getting myself financially prepared to take certain classes so that as I move into the latter half of my life and transition out of this corporate space, I can truly live my life as an embodied creative, as an embodied pleasured practitioner, and be in service to the community in that way and share my gifts in that way and have the sustainability and the foundation and the framework that I started putting together in theory. The theory and the academic part of what I was doing was great. But my foundation, my personal foundation, my body, my personal framework on how I can live sustainably in this space needed to be revisited, reworked, reconstructed. I needed to rebuild myself. So now that I'm here and I have a stronger foundation, I can return back to the part of myself that I connected with, that I felt like, yes, this is me. I can return back to her and allow her to grow and evolve and expand because my foundation is set. So episodes moving forward will be reflective of this, and I'm excited about that because now I get to actually be who I've been saying that I am. Not that I've been faking, but actually living and breathing in the person who I know that I am, and not just saying like, yeah, I'm a pleasure practitioner, I'm this, but like really my life reflecting that who I say I am feels really good. Like I feel authentic now. And this isn't to say that I haven't been authentic before, but I feel like there's levels of authenticity. Like, yeah, I can say I'm the pleasure priestess, I'm the pleasure scholar, I'm working towards pleasure embodiment, and I can create all these terms that sound really good from a marketing perspective, and it grabs hold to the attention, but actually living the life that you portray yourself to be on these interwebs is a level of authenticity that many of us are not seeing from the people who say that they do these things, right? And it isn't to say that you have to vlog yourself on a daily basis, because that can become performative. This isn't to say that it is, but just that can become performative. So this isn't to say that you have to document your process, but when people begin to learn from you, when people come to your content, when people get to know you outside of social media, and they see visibly, they see that you do the things that you say on the internet that means something, and to be in a space that, yes, this is me and this is what I'm doing, feels great. So all I have to say is that I'm glad that I'm here. I'm glad that I'm here and I'm returning home to myself. And I feel like I'm in an important space in my life where I can really comfortably talk about all the things that I started exploring in my earlier years and speak to them with a bit more wisdom. So the exploration of today's episode is centered around, I guess I can say, the Madonna-whore complex, but a lot of it is centered around just binary thinking about sex and pleasure. And we're always going to have a resurgent of the pick-me purities and those who want to have this very patriarchal, white supremacist foundation of sex and pleasure. And make it seem as if those of us who are amplifying sexual sovereignty, amplifying understanding your body as a woman, the person who is femme-of-center, feminine-of-center, feminine spectrum. There are always going to be people who are going to make it seem as if those of us who are telling you to learn your body and to be connected to your body and to understand your body and to know how it wants to experience pleasure, what your desires are, to satiate those desires, who are going to try to frame us as heathens. And that's okay. You can frame me as a heathen. I'm totally fine with that. If that's what you want to do, if that's how you want to frame it, so you can make yourself seem better or of more authority than other people, like that's your business. But there are always going to be folks who are going to demonize sex, pleasure, sensuality, the sovereignty of all of that. And there are always going to be people who are smart enough to divest from those narratives and really start to explore sex and pleasure and sensuality for themselves. But I guess I'm here at the Madonna-whore complex because I've talked about it in my newsletters a lot. I learned from Sister Nganga Daisy. I learned from her. She actually gave me the prompt as I was on my pleasure journey. She actually gave me the prompt to explore the Madonna-whore complex. In her group, The Witch's Brew, she talked about Virgo season and Virgo being the archetype of the sacred whore. And it was like something lit up in me because I never thought about it like that, right? Virgo is the archetype of the virgin. But when people now in today's society, when people think about the virgin, they think about someone who has not engaged in any sexual activity, but that is not actually what that means. A virgin has always meant a woman who is sovereign of herself, a woman who is unmarried, and a woman who has autonomy over herself. And of course, as the patriarchy and white supremacy does, trying to control the authority of a woman, virgin evolved into being someone who had not been sexually active. That was applied to women only, or young girls only, and then over time it became a gender neutral term. But virgin has always meant a woman who is sovereign of herself, who is in ownership of herself, who is not married, who has autonomy over her life, her experiences, her finances. That is always what being sovereign has meant. And again, patriarchy and white supremacy is what it is. And those terms have evolved into focusing on the sexual experience of someone, whether they have had the experience or not. And within that, we find the Madonna-whore complex. And for those of us who are unfamiliar, the origin of the Madonna-whore complex comes from the Marys. Mary, the mother of Jesus, Mary Magdalene. And there are a lot of stories, narratives, parables, if you will, surrounding Mary Magdalene and her relationship to Jesus. There are certain documents that say Mary Magdalene and Jesus got married and they had kids, and they lived in northern Africa at the dawn of his ascension or post-ascension. So there are stories that Jesus and Mary had children in North Africa. I am unclear as to what ancestral lineage that is supposed to be connected with, but there are researchers who have said Mary Magdalene and Jesus had kids. There's also a book. It's not called the Mary Magdalene Chronicles, but it is called, it's something with Mary Magdalene. I will have that book in the show notes so you can go research on your own. But there is a whole book talking about Mary Magdalene and her relationship with Jesus. She was essentially a sacred whore, and her washing Jesus's feet was her showing her sacredness, her respect of Jesus, if you will. And people romanticize Mary because, as the story has been framed, she was the virgin who was impregnated by the divine or by God to be the mother of Jesus because she was a virgin. She was untouched. She was clean. She wasn't sullied by man and whomever, but also she was a young, innocent woman. So there's this archetype, there's this story created around Mary, the mother of Jesus, as this woman who was pure and chaste and innocent, in comparison to Mary Magdalene, who is this heathenist whore who was passing out cooch all over Jerusalem. And how dare she touch the hem of Jesus's garment, trying to get his attention to become pure, right? But also a part of that, her not supposed to touch the hem of his garment, was because she was on her menstrual cycle. And back then, and even now, menstrual cycles are demonized, when actually a menstrual cycle is the most sacred time for a woman. So the Madonna-whore complex, its origins lie there between Mary, mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene. But when we start thinking about the spectrum of a woman's identity, because this only applies to women and those who are femme-of-center, when we start to put the identity of a woman and how she shows up in the world in these two binary spectrums, we then teach young girls there are two identities that they can be. They could be the Madonna, the Mary, mother of Jesus version of themselves, or they can be the Mary Magdalene version of themselves. But in letting them know this, we then frame that the Mary, mother of Jesus version of who they could be, the Madonna, is the only way to experience wholeness in order to have fulfilling lives, in order to achieve their career goals, their dreams, to get the partner, the spouse of their dreams, that they have to follow this Madonna, pure, virginal version of themselves. And if they choose to live in sovereignty of their sexuality, it is not going to garner them the same type of results as they would if they just kept themselves pure and chaste. And unfortunately, that is the lie that we tell young girls, and they miss out on experiencing the many aspects of who they are. It prevents them from knowing their body. It prevents them from knowing themselves. It prevents them from understanding who they are in a space of pleasure. It prevents them from being able to understand their body and be able to express the things that make them feel good, the things that do not make them feel good. It prevents them from understanding the full gamut, the full spectrum of their sexuality as a woman. It creates unrealistic expectations in dating, right? We have how women are being represented in the media, and we see these different type of aesthetics that are being shown on the webs and on social media. And when we demonize sex and weaponize it against our young women, our young girls, and those who are feminine of center, they then go on TV, or they go on the interwebs, and they go on the social media, and they see what their parents or other adults and other people who romanticize these pure aesthetics of what a woman is supposed to be. And then they start to question their own identity and say, well, society says that this type of person gets what they want. Society says this type of person goes far in life. Society says in order for me to have the friends that I desire, the partner that I desire, the experiences that I desire, that I have to fall into this category. So they deny themselves. They then begin to compartmentalize themselves and compartmentalize their creative expressions and sexual expressions. And this does not necessarily mean physical sex, right? Because creative energy and sexual energy are one and the same. They are intersectional, but they are one and the same. They have the same purpose, and that is to birth things into the world. So when we have young girls and those who are feminine of center, when they see these clean, pure, soft aesthetics, they become disconnected from their rage. They become disconnected from their anger. They become disconnected from their passion, and they swallow themselves whole in order to fit into an aesthetic that society says they have to embody in order to self-actualize. And that is such a dangerous thing, because as these young people begin to become teenagers and begin to become adult women, a few things are going to happen. Either they're going to recognize all of that is bullshit and rebel heavily. Then you're really going to have a little heathen in your midst. So they're either going to rebel heavily, they're going to force themselves consistently to fit in an aesthetic that is in resistance to who they are. And they are going to learn how to operate in resistance and learn how to compartmentalize themselves and mask and swallow themselves and silence themselves, right? Or they're going to be resentful. They're going to be resentful because they're also going to see those who don't compartmentalize themselves, those who live in their free in their creative and sexual expression. And they're going to see those young girls and those who are feminine of center self-actualize, and then they're going to become resentful because they're going to say, I did everything right. I did everything everyone said that I was supposed to do. I kept myself pure. I followed the rules. I did this. But here's this chick living in her full sexual self, living in pleasure, hoes becoming housewives. And I am not doing that. I went and got my degree. I went and I kept myself saved. I stayed in the church. I did all of these things that everybody said that I was supposed to do. And here is the hoe who don't go to church, who's following another different spiritual tradition, who's out here with her titties out on the beach. Men just coming up to her, fawning over her, worshiping the fucking ground that she walks on. And I am not getting everything. And this woman, this person is getting everything that they desire. So those things are what actualizes when we try to enforce a binary spectrum of feminine expression. When we try to impart the Madonna-whore complex in so many different small ways and so many different subtle ways onto our young girls and those who are feminine of center, when we try to do that, all it does is leads them into one of those three spaces. And by the time they realize they don't have to deal with any of that, they'll spend the latter half of their lives trying to figure out who they are. And when I tell you, that is a very challenging journey to go on, to unlearn and decondition yourself from things that your family has told you, your parents have told you, other adults have told you, especially if you grew up in the church, among of the many Abrahamic faiths in the spectrum of Christianity. If you grew up there and you listen to your pastors talk to you about what a God-fearing woman is and how to find a God-fearing man, and you sat in those Ruth and Boaz young Christian conferences, it is hard to divest from that thinking and decondition yourself from that and really begin to intuitively understand how your body, how your soul, how your spirit desires to show up in sex and pleasure and in this world, in your human experience. So the cost of denying wholeness with oneself and trying to impart such strong binary thinking can be essentially very detrimental to any young girl or person who is feminine of center, even as someone who grows up in the feminine gender spectrum, in the quote unquote female gender spectrum, and in recognizing that you are non-binary and having to divest from being forced to live your life as solely one thing, when you recognize that how you look at gender is very expansive. It's not, I'm not masculine or feminine, I'm both. And I can operate in these expressions at any given moment because I recognize they are a whole part of me. They're who I am, right? So it takes so much time trying to reset the brain and reset the mind to embody and embrace wholeness. and to divest from the binary, the left and the right, the this or the that, to allow ourselves to say, I don't have to choose. I am all. In the church, they tell us God says, I am. God is I am. That is an affirmative statement. That is you telling your brain, this is what you want to do. This is who you want to be. This is how you want to show up. So if we are supposed to be, air quotes, children of God, and God says, I am, then as children of God, do we not affirm ourselves with I am? Do we not say who we are? Do we not go, I am a person who's not binary. I am a person who identifies as feminine. I'm a person who identifies as masculine. I'm a person who identifies as a person of pleasure, a sexual being. I am a sexual being. I am a pleasurable person. I am a sensual person. Can we not affirm ourselves? If we are supposed to be an offspring of the sky daddy, if that's what you're saying, if we are supposed to be embodiments of the divine and source says I am, do we not follow that same pattern? Do we not follow that same structure? So that's when we start talking about things like the Madonna-whore complex or embodying this purity space. It becomes confusing because God is not in a binary space. So if God is not binary, God is gender neutral. The patriarchy and white supremacy tries to tell us that God is male, but that is because white men wrote the Bible. What God is a spirit. We don't know how that spirit is manifesting itself. We can't give a definitive account of what that spirit is. We can say Jesus was male, but we cannot say God is anything because God is. So if God is, we can't assign something, a gender to God because God is, right? So if God exists as is, why can't we as human offspring of God and the divine exist as is? And if that is the case, if I can exist as is, that means I choose to then exist as someone who is pleasure embodied. And that does not mean specifically penetrative pleasure. That is a genre of pleasure. That is one genre of pleasure. Pleasure, my famed example, pleasure is you just enjoying a cup of ice cream because pleasure is what pleases you, right? So if pleasure is what pleases you, a nice summer breeze pleases me, a good song on my Apple or my Spotify playlist pleases me, a good gospel song pleases me, a good movie pleases me. There's so many things that please me that are not specific to somebody sticking their penis in my vagina. So pleasure is not resigned to that one thing. Pleasure has many different iterations. So when I say I'm pleasured in body, it's me saying that I embody all the different iterations of pleasure, and I just go do that. I'm gonna sit with that for a second because I feel like that groundwork, that foundation is super important, right? So as we are shifting with how we are looking at feminine expression, we already know that false dichotomy of pure versus sexual is not the path to wholeness, is not the path to integration. I actually want to divest from saying pure because I feel like when we say pure, there's still a connotation that it's without stain. And it is impossible for us as human beings to be without stain. I don't necessarily believe in the original sin. I have a lot of thoughts on Adam and Eve. I have a lot of thoughts on Adam, Eve, and Lilith, right? I have a lot of thoughts on that. I don't necessarily believe in the original sin. However, I know that as a human, I am imperfect. I am perfectly imperfect. I am perfect in the eyes of the creator. I am perfect in the eyes of the divine. But because I'm human, I'm a divine being, but I am not without flaws. I'm going to fall. I'm going to fail. I'm going to experience a depth of emotions. Some of those emotions are going to be on the positive side, on the affirmative side. Some of those emotions are going to be on the adverse side. But that is all part of who I am as a human being. So I am not without fault. I'm not unstained as a human being, right? So I actually want to divest from using pure or identifying sexuality and sensuality and pleasure as pure, and just see it as raw, true emotion. Reclaiming the full range of what that expression looks like and accepting the rawness of what that spectrum of expression and what it looks like, and working towards integrating that into who we are, right? If you want to identify yourself as pure, that's your business. But I believe when we start to divest from those words that still have an air of patriarchy and white supremacy to it, we can then look at how we are identifying ourselves and how we are connecting with certain language in a way that allows for growth and evolution and allows for true embodiment. It's hard to lean into true embodiment when we're operating from a space of purity, when we know what purity stands for and we know how purity has been framed, particularly if you identify as Black. We know how purity has been framed in relationship to who we are as Black people, as Black women, and those who are feminine of center. So I'm divesting from pure, right? So just identifying as a sexual being, just identifying as someone who enjoys sex, who understands that sexual energy is creative energy, and that even when you sit at your laptop and write your heart out about the greatest story that you have saw in your head, or write about whatever type of professional development, how to work, you recognize that is creative energy, and that the thoughts in your head and how you are co-creating with however you are receiving the downloads are coming together. And in that co-creation, the result of the final product is this baby, a creative outcome that you have developed, whether it is a book, whether it is a painting, whether it is a song, whether it is a choreography, whether it is a product that you have manifested with your hands, that you have actualized with your hands. You recognize that sex energy is you co-creating with the divine source and the divine makeup and the ancestors and the angels and the orisha, if that is your spiritual practice, or the loa, if that is your spiritual practice, and whatever deities that you associate with. You recognize that the co-creation between all of those divine beings and yourself helps to produce the outcome that is your creative project. That is you identifying with your sexual energy. On top of the fact that you and another human being can co-create together. that is the spectrum of it. It's not a binary. Binary is you deciding that you identify with sex as one of the other. That's the binary. Integration is you understanding that sex rides along those two spectrums, and wherever you find yourself along the spectrum is where you live. And if you identify across the spectrum, if you resonate across the spectrum as both and, then that's where you live. So let's start there. Let's start with that as a foundation and as a way to set a path to integrate and become whole. You have your integration to your path of wholeness along the spectrum of sexual expression where you live. And hopefully it's in the space of both and, because that disrupts the binary. Recognizing that two truths can exist at the same time, that we live in the space of both and that everything lives on a spectrum. That disrupts the binary in itself. Next is language. I find language very important because if we don't have a language, it makes it very challenging to be able to identify what we are trying to do and who we are trying to be. And if we don't have language that reflects where we're going, it's hard for us to then embody this new space or work towards embodiment for this new space. And then it's hard for us to divest from language that has kept us stuck. So finding language to be able to express where we are going and how we are trying to show up in the world is super, super important. Then we have to think about, once we have this path, right? We set this landscape. Once we have this path, once we have this language, then we have to think about how all this is showing up in our day to day. There's some challenges that you are going to face once you decide to walk this path. A lot of it is going to start manifesting in your relationships. Things such as the dating dynamics you have, hidden rules that are embedded into dating that stem from the Madonna-whore complex, you not feeling comfortable with having sexual arrangements, even though that's something that you might want to do, or like, no, you can't be out here free fucking, because if you want a relationship, whoever you want to be with, your partner is not going to choose you if you allow yourself to have one night stands or have sex on a first date, right? So those standards that you're going to have to divest from or work through as you are working towards a path of embodiment. All those things are not necessarily true. There are some men who it's a turn off if a woman is aggressive in her sexuality, aggressive in her sexual space, have sex on the first night, have sex on the first date, do one night stands, chooses to have multiple partners. There are some men, for them, that is a turn off. There's a plethora of men where it is not. And the key is going to be finding your people. The more you start to sit in sovereignty, the more you work towards the path of embodiment and start to sit autonomously in that space, the more you are going to magnetize the people who are on your timeline. And the more that you say no to the things that you don't want, the more you create room for the things that you do. The more you use I am, the more you affirm yourself. I am this person, however you identify yourself to be. Whatever new narrative that you are creating for yourself, as long as you say, I am that person, and this new narrative that you are creating for yourself, the more the universe is going to co-create and conspire with you to bring the things that are in alignment with who you say you are. That's super important. So the relationship dynamics you are going to have to navigate is you literally being the co-creator of this new path of embodiment that you are creating for yourself, and knowing when to say no to the things you do not want, and standing firm in that and standing on business with that, and knowing how to say yes for the shit you do want and standing on business and standing firm with that. And that's hard. As I'm saying it out loud, it seems easy. Oh, I know how to say no to this. Oh, I know how to say yes to that. No, you don't. You know why? Because you're still divesting from all of those interconnected narratives and thoughts and processes that adults have beat into your head since you were a kid, and have told you in order for you to self-actualize as an adult, you have to operate this way. All of those things are so far deep embedded into your psyche that you are constantly rewiring your brain. And because you are constantly rewiring your brain, and because the universe is going to test you to ensure you say who you are constantly going to be put into situations that are going to encourage you to level up and stand on what you said. That's how the universe works. I know people don't like to talk about that, but that's literally how the universe works. The universe wants to ensure you are going to be what you said you're going to be. Because we like to say things out loud and say, well, I'm going to do this, and I am going that, and I am this, and I am that. And then the universe comes around with a challenge, with a test. You said you this. You said you this. But are you? So here's an example for you to prove that this is who you are. Because if you can show me that this is who you are, everything that aligns with this, I'm going to send in your direction, because that lets me know you know how to handle it. Now I know you know how to handle it. But if you go against what you just said you were, and this 20-minute montage that you did on TikTok and your friend group and your friend chat and your Snapchats and all them other chats, if you go against the little monologue that you just did 20 minutes ago, then I'm going to keep sending you the other things that you said that you didn't want, because you just let me know you're not ready. That's part of the test. A lot of people don't like to talk about that, but that's literally part of the test. In order for you to really fully live in this path of embodiment, to walk on this path of embodiment, you are going to receive activations that are going to test whether you are ready. And if you're not ready, it's not bad. It's not a bad thing. If you're not ready, it's okay. That means you need a little bit more time to work through whatever is blocking you from moving forward, whatever is gatekeeping you from moving forward, whatever thought processes, language, narratives that is preventing you from moving forward. It just means you need time to work through that. That is going to be your greatest challenge when navigating this space. Being able to say you are who you say you are and mean it. And even when I say and mean it, it's not that you don't mean it. You're just not there. That's very important, right? Because a lot of spiritualists, gurus, and those who have taken on the archetype of being sages, speaking about things like embodiment and pleasure and spirituality, a lot of them will make you feel like because you are not actually ready, or because there's still parts of you that have to be unlearned and rewired, that something's wrong with you for not being ready. Oh, you're not ready yet. Well, then you just gonna be dealing with your shit. That's a horrible disposition to be in. That's like a horrible take. And yes, there are some instances where you got to be a little forceful. But I also want you to realize that there's grace that lives there. There's grace that lives there. You have to show yourself grace, and you have to be around other people who will extend grace to you. Because again, remember, we're human. We are not without stain. And because we are not without stain, then how can I judge you? How can I judge you for being in a place that's so new for you, that's so untouched and untapped, and expect you immediately to get your shit together? Because you have to now unlearn 20, 30, 40, 50 even years of conditioning. And you can't do that in one sitting. You don't wake up the next day and be like, oh, I'm healed. That is not how that works. So you deciding to divest from binary thinking as it pertains to your sexuality, your feminine expression, your pleasure expression, and work towards a path of pleasure embodiment does not happen overnight. There's so much work that has to be done for you to decondition and unlearn and rewire your brain. And on top of that, all of this cannot happen in a vacuum. Being in community is so important, because you may think you're so far behind and come to realize you're a lot further along than what you thought. You may think that the language that you are creating for yourself is not sustainable or doesn't hold any weight, and come to find out you've unlocked something that somebody else didn't even think about, who's been on this journey longer than you. You've provided them with perspective that they didn't even think about. So it's important to be in community, because you need people to be able to affirm where you are, but also allow space for expansion, for mental expansion, for spiritual expansion, for emotional expansion. You need space to allow for that expansion so that people can begin to pour into you. People can, again, affirm you. People can add to what you are building for yourself. And it's not so contained where you are becoming your own self-fulfilling prophecy. You're arming yourself with the tools to dismantle you or disrupt you from your journey, because other people aren't there to show you a different lens, to show you a different perspective, or to help you see in your peripheral, which may be a little cloudy and maybe a little muddy, because you're still sifting through all that muck and mire that you're trying to filter out of your mind, out of your body, out of your system, out of your soul. You're still trying to cleanse your soul clean. You need your community hyssop to help, in this case, purify. Not necessarily purity, but purify, cleanse all the excess stains that you do not need. There's some stains in us as human beings that build character, make us who we are, and allow people to love on us and be in community with us because we are of like mind, we are of like spirit, we are of similar backgrounds, right? So there's certain stains that help you attract the community that you need to be around in order for you to self-actualize the way that you are desiring. And then there are some stains that continuously prevent you from becoming that person. So purifying the things that you don't need. It's like being able to sift through what's the good bacteria, what's the good gut flora, and what's the bad bacteria and a bad gut flora. That same thing that our body does within our system, that is literally how we have to navigate our lives. Being able to purify some of the good bacteria that we need so that we can create more. We can stimulate more and be in community with all the good bacteria, all the good people who have similar stains to us that we can grow and learn from, and all the other stains that have done what they needed to do. All the other stains that need to expire. We thank those stains for doing what they needed to do, and we let those things rest, right? I hope that's feeling good. I do. I hope that's feeling good. It's feeling good for me as well. So, how do we move forward? Here are three ways that you can begin to move forward, particularly if you're not yet on this journey and this is sparking something for you. This is opening something for you. This is a rabbit hole space for you. 3 ways that you can begin, right? Understanding the power of feminine spectrum, femme-of-center, woman-led sexual communities, particularly if you're Black. Being around like-minded people is going to be so eye-opening for you. I talk about, I can't remember what episode it is at the moment, but I'll link it. But I talk about how being a part of Daisy's group, The Witch's Brew, saved me. As I was coming into my spiritual gifts, if I had not, matter of fact, the episode is the Avon Ladies of Spirituality. That's where I talk about that episode. Had I not joined the Witch's Brew when I did, I do not know if I would have had spiritual growth the way that I've had. I don't know if I would be here in this moment if I had not joined the Witch's Brew. That group saved me. And being around other spiritualists, men, women, non-binary, gender fluid, being around other Black spiritualists was so refreshing for me. And they all were not practitioners of Ifa. Some were hoodoo practitioners, voodoo saints, though persons who were part of the Akan religion and other forms of ADR and ATRs, and even some Christian folks were there who understood their ancestral lineages, right? So being around all those Black spiritualists and different practitioners and having other opinions and other thoughts, other forms of education, people having workshops and things and being able to share their knowledge, that helped me so much. And it allowed me to come out of the vacuum that I was in. And it opened me to a world of spirituality that was just unknown to me. So being around other feminine spectrum, femme-of-center, women-owned Black, if you are Black, communities who are pleasure embodied persons. The Amina Institute is one. So I'm always gonna shout out people I know. The Amina Institute is one. That is a space of pleasure embodiment. That is, at least for me, that is the space of pleasure embodiment. There are certification classes that she has there. She's been doing this work for over 20 years. So the Amina Institute is one place that you can go to, but there's so many. Lotus Laloba has her space. That's another one of my peoples. A coach, Aisha Bellamy, who I always have here on the podcast, is another space of pleasure-centered communities. You have movement artists like Lily Shepherd, who have communities. You have Latoya Dixon, who has her community, her boudoir community, the rebels. There are places that you can go where you can experience women who are working towards pleasure and embodiment in different ways. This is not always education. I just gave you movement artists, right? Boudoir. So there are so many other ways that you can experience this, but tapping into those communities is the first step to really being able to authenticate yourself with your sexual expression, your pleasure expression, your sacral energy. Being able to authenticate yourself there is becoming a member of those communities, right? By becoming a member of those communities, it gives you a safe space to explore without judgment, because everybody on the same journey as you. That's also very important. Sometimes when we try to do this thing on our own and we start talking to our friends who are not on the same timeline as we are, who are not on the same path as we're on, they start to judge us. Whether they realize it or not, they start to judge us. And because we trust those people, we then begin to ingest and internalize those things. And that could throw us off the path. That could throw your psyche off. So being in those communities offers you a safe space to explore your identity, your expressions without judgment, so that you can be in commune with people who speak the language that you speak and are providing language for you to speak and are giving you a space to grow. Not fail, because this is not a space where you fail, but this is a space where you grow, and you'll begin to recognize your growth and recognize what areas you may need to continue to decondition and divest from, and what areas that you can then stimulate or optimize, if we're going to use marketing terms, optimize because you've purified, you've filtered out that space enough that you can begin to grow and expand. And then lastly, developing practices that honor the fullness of your sexual expression. And you will learn that in the communities that you join. That's where it's going to give you a baseline to start developing practices, or a blueprint or a template to start developing practices that you can then evolve yourself based on your needs. So that's super important. Like, the first step is always going to be community, and that's going to allow you to explore without judgment in a safe space, in a container. And it's also going to give you space to develop practices that you can then internalize and embody for yourself on your path to pleasure embodiment. This feels good. Even then, you can start curating your timelines, right? Developing media literacy, developing that language that allows you to curate your social media spaces and whatever you're listening to, curating those things so that you are filtering out the things that are a rejection of what you no longer want to ingest and consume, and things that are along the path that you're on. You begin to see those things, and you can start your deep dive and develop language that allows you to have effective community conversations that support the integration of your sexuality. And of course, lastly, supporting any educational initiatives that teach sexual wholeness. And you'll find that in the communities that you join. You see a pattern here? I'm encouraging you to join a community, even if you want to join the Muses Lab community. If you want to deep dive into the Muses Lab, I am slowly getting back to my practices of pleasure scholarship and sharing information. I have a plethora of things you can read. On my Substack, you can peruse the Muses Lab Instagram page. Plenty of content that is there. So connecting with people that teach sexual wholeness. I did not mention Tatiana Tarot, but if you join her Possess Your Spirit membership, she has classes like Embodying the High Priestess, the energetics of opulence. Those are things that help you embody pleasure and sexual wholeness, but from a very deep spiritual lens that is definitely feminine centric. So I done named about 5 different communities that you can join. I will have those also in the show notes. I've named 5 different communities that you can join, people that you can connect with who will assist on guiding you in the space of pleasure embodiment, including myself. So as you're navigating again, divesting from binary thinking, and working towards a path of pleasure embodiment, just know that you cannot or should not do that alone. You should be in communities with like minds. Definitely support any type of classes, educational initiatives that teach this type of work that can help you develop the language that you need to curate and craft the narrative of embodiment that you need for yourself. These communities help you to explore what that looks like for you without judgment, and also helps you develop practices that honor your individual sacred expression so that you can be in sovereignty with yourself. If this is new for you, just know your binary thinking of sex and pleasure keeps you from being embodied. And the moment you allow yourself to embrace spectrum, the concept or the ideology of both and recognize that your sexual expression is a raw energy that is there for you to embody, and that divesting from purity politics is going to allow you to evolve into the best self that you have been desiring to be. Once you embrace that, the possibilities are endless. Yeah, this feels good. Thank you for tapping into the Muses Lab Podcast. Until we meet again. Thank you for tapping into this week's adventure. As always, don't forget to share the wealth with your community. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. And to deep dive into the Muses Lab, join my Substack community at siobhanl.substack.com. For more information, hop into the show notes for references and ways to connect. Meet you on our next adventure.